thought that it would be an Irishman between you and a drink, but here we are. All right, well, welcome everybody. Trent Mell, CEO of Electra Battery Materials, formerly First Cobalt. We changed our name about a year back, so if you were following First Cobalt, this is, I guess, the second iteration related, but with a slightly broader mandate than when we started the company some years back. So, of course, there'll be some forward-looking statements. So we've got this slide in for you here. So a little bit about Electra, and I'm going to back up a bit. We do have a mineral deposit in the state of Idaho, one of the very few primary cobalt projects in the world, and one of the only ones on the continent. And it has an important role to play, we believe, in the onshoring of the supply chain, particularly post-adoption of the Inflation Reduction Act. However, closer to cash flow is our refinery, about 5 hours north of here in the town of Temiskaming Shores. And so when you think about Electra, first and foremost, we are a refining company. And when you think about battery materials, yes, we've got copper and cobalt and nickel production here in the continent, but all of that, historically, that production is serving the alloy market, not the battery market, which requires a salt product or a chemical product. And so it's a different processing technology from mine to refinery, hydrometallurgical refinery, to produce the salts. And then eventually you go into the cathode of the battery, cathode cell, EV plant. And that's where we sit. We're that first step after the mine. And we are in a league of one. Nobody is doing this yet in North America. This is an industry dominated by China. And so we speak regularly to Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Canadian entities, and supply chain partners as part of the North American supply chain strategy. So to get back on script here, where we're going as a company, we are just months away from commissioning our first plant, our cobalt plant. It'll produce 5,000 tons of cobalt per year, which incidentally will be 100% of North American production. And it's enough to power about 1.5 million electric vehicles per year, just to give you a sense of the scale. The vision that we're pursuing, we were First Cobalt, now Electra, is to start with hydrometallurgical refining to produce battery-grade cobalt, but thereafter to use the same team, process, infrastructure, and permits to do the same with nickel and battery recycling and perhaps manganese as well. So provide that suite of refining products so that you can create an ecosystem where precursor manufacturers and cathodes can come and set up onshore in a co-located fashion. So it's permitted. We'll have the best carbon footprint of all refiners, cobalt refiners in the world, hands down. As I said, cash flow is just a few months away. And as you'll see in a moment, probably the biggest catalyst over the last quarter was our commercial contract we signed with LG Energy Solution, which is the largest non-Chinese battery maker in the world. So if I jump forward here, I want to hone in a little bit on the U.S. Inflation Reduction Act. So hundreds of billions of dollars of capital for clean and green energy initiatives and energy transition, serving particularly the mobility sector. And there's two provisions to that, right? You got the vehicle credit, the $7,500 U.S. vehicle credit for an electric vehicle purchase in the U.S. And there's a few hurdles you have to get through. One of them that's better known is the higher and ever-increasing content of U.S. or free trade country processing content. It goes from 40 up to 80 starting in 2024. And you start losing credits if you don't kind of keep up with the content requirements. The other one, which is even more onerous, is that you can't have any critical minerals processed or produced in an entity of concern. So that's North Korea and Iran, which is not a problem, but think Russian nickel and China everything. And what I'm showing you here in the blue is the percentage of global refining capacity per commodity, and well, in this case, battery cells as well, that is accounted for in China. So globally, you're looking at about 80% of refining is occurring in China right now. So if you're trying to develop a North American supply chain and you want that $7,500 vehicle credit against a $40,000 vehicle and build up your market share, this is really, really important to make sure you can build this out. We're going to need about 8 Electras on the continent in the next 10 years to make this happen, or somewhere around the world that's not inside of China. LG was perhaps more prescient than others in locking up a contract with us, but it's really picked up the tenor of conversations that we've had on our supply chain. So that's kind of where we sit. Now, this refinery has been around, built, commissioned in 1996, ran to 2015. It is a hydrometallurgical refinery, so leach, SX, filtration kind of system. But it produced a cobalt carbonate, nickel carbonate, and some silver doré on a batch at a custom feed basis up until about 2015. We acquired this in 2017, 2018 as part of a roll-up of the historic cobalt camp, silver cobalt assets, and did some drilling. We have since optioned off those properties and focused in on this refinery because with the advent of time, it occurred to us that this is truly a unique asset in North America, and it's surrounded by 600 acres of land that we brought together. So a big footprint to allow us to expand from cobalt to nickel to recycling and so forth. And we've got clay bed, we've got ample water, hydroelectricity. We're a town of 15,000, and we're 2 hours away from Sudbury, which has been a really important source of expertise for what we're doing. If you were to go there today, the footprint's now doubled in size. We've added buildings, solvent extraction, and whatnot. But this, I think, is just the starting point, 100 million plus of existing infrastructure and assets and permits that are already in place. So anybody that wanted to start today is a few years behind us, and probably at this point 150 or $200 million back as well. So let's talk about the contract. So 2 years ago, a year ago, I guess I would have been here telling you about where the feed is coming from. The supply is coming from partly from Glencore and a trading arm of CMOC called IXM. So we've got the feedstock in. And think of us as we're buying cobalt intermediate product at cobalt hydroxide at market prices on the fast markets, and we're selling a cobalt sulfate finished product on fast markets as well. So it's almost like a toll operator. It's a margin-based business. Control your costs, and the vagaries of the market shouldn't impact our EBITDA. We should be fairly consistent through time, subject to input costs. On the other side of it, where are you going to sell? And this is where the market has been focused of late. Our shareholders want to know who our clients are. So LG, we signed this contract about a month and a half ago. We had a kind of a state level signing ceremony here in Canada, and a 3-year supply contract. They're now, by default, our biggest contract with 60% of our production for our first 3 years. 7,000 tons of cobalt per year, so there'll be a ramp-up year next year as we go into production, and then thereafter, 3,000 tons a year in 2024, 2025. And so for us, that represents kind of top-line revenue of about $70 million US at the time that we priced the deal. For them, it's $400 million of product. So it does solve a big problem in terms of their onshoring strategy. The next step for them will be to do the same with nickel and manganese recycling, and we'd hope to continue the conversations along with them. But this is a really important relationship. 60%, I would say the other 40% of our production is just about sold. We've got a number of non-binding MOUs and agreements in place that are not yet public, but by the end of the year, I would expect that even if it's not in the public domain, we should be 100% sold, and future sales would be booked against an expansion either here by enlarging what we've got, or an expansion into the Bécancour battery park in Quebec, and I'll come to that. Just quickly on the leadership team, Mark Trevisial, right next to my mug, our VP Corp Development, came out of Falconbridge, worked at the Kidd zinc plant. He ran the smelter for Falconbridge in Sudbury, a lot of process experience, and it was around him that we built a really strong owners team comprised of people from, now Glencore and Vale. Dave Marshall, further down the line, 30-plus year Vale veteran. And our leadership, everybody comes out of bigger companies. Renata Cardoso, our ESG VP, also out of Vale. We've got Joe in the back of the room from Sherritt. So all of us have that kind of mining pedigree. Of course, now we're focused more on the refining end, and a supportive board as well, including the former governor of Idaho, Butch Otter. All right, just a couple of pictures, just some of our team here doing some works inside the refinery. Where we are today, probably up this a little bit, but basically the plant that you saw, the old plant's been 85% recommissioned. That's going to be important for battery recycling test work we're about to start. Procurement nearing completion, detailed engineering, SX plant, that's a newer building that we've added on. And so you can see the progress has been great, all with an unblemished health and safety record, not a single lost time since we started up the project, which, as all of you will agree, is kind of job one. Inside, so let's look at the inside here. This equipment recommissioning is helpful because in a few weeks' time we're going to be starting a battery recycling demonstration plant. For 2 years we've been doing dozens of MET tests, bench scale, pilot on our recycling flow sheet. And this plant, the fact that it's already built, a lot of this will be dedicated towards the cobalt plant, but the fact that it's there and commissioned and available to us is going to allow us to run up to 75 tons of black mass. So that's the powder material that comes out of a lithium-ion battery once you've shredded it. We'll run it through our plant, and we're going to recover cobalt, nickel, copper, lithium, and graphite. It's a hot industry. It's still a small market, but getting it right, and that's the important part here, getting it right is important. Right now we're collecting cell phones and laptops and power tools, but in the future, really, my vision would be you're direct sourcing from cell plants and OEM manufacturers, and you're part of that sort of closed loop. So this is the era where maybe you buy black mass in the market and you perfect a flow sheet. You can scale up and build your market credentials, but ultimately this is going to tie into an LG energy solution relationship and maybe another OEM relationship, and we would be part of that supply chain for both primary feedstocks as well as the recycling, rendering their batteries even greener by virtue of our carbon footprint and by virtue of taking their material and putting it right back into their supply chain. And then here's just a picture of the SX plant. You saw the existing building. This plant's just a little bit bigger than the building you saw in the picture. An important part of battery grade production is the quality of the material in solution, whether it be cobalt or nickel. In this case, cobalt, you need a 99.9% purity in solution. There are a dozen or so deleterious elements that are, I guess, assessed for inclusion in the battery, and we've had no issues achieving that in our flow sheet and our test plans, but it necessitates a fairly large SX circuit in order to achieve the level of purity required. So we've been working with Metso Autotech. The equipment is now arriving at site, the tanks are, and they'll be there assisting us through the commissioning as well. Just a picture of the inside to give you a sense of the scale. This has changed a fair bit, actually. We've now got the roof on. It's insulated. We got the inside paneling, and all the SX tanks have started to arrive on site, 36 of them in total. Lab, it's hard to take a picture of the lab in all its little corners, but we've got world-class lab that's coming together, led by a couple of PhDs, a decent team of metallurgists in-house, so we're not going to be consistently relying on outside expertise. And then in terms of what our projection is right now, I mean, ultimately, as I said, we're ramping up to 5,000 tons of cobalt contained. My own KPI that we've established for our team is, about $2 Canadian per pound of cobalt produced is where we would like to see ourselves. So 5,000 tons is about 11 and a bit million pounds, so 22 million CAD of EBITDA is where we would see ourselves in kind of round one. In the first year, of course, you're ramping up, so production of 5,000 becomes something closer to probably 2, and there's our projected earnings in the first year of production. Share price, here you can see how we performed. We did announce a small equity raise yesterday, so we took it on the chin a little bit yesterday, so didn't deliberately leave it out, but you'd see a dip, and we're coming back up today. But anyway, you can see where we are. We recently did a share consolidation to get ourselves listed on the NASDAQ, providing us some good liquidity into the U.S. What else do I want to talk about? The research coverage that we have here. We've got Red Cloud. I don't see Red Cloud. I think we accidentally left you out. Red Cloud must have its own page. I don't know what happened there, David.
That's okay. I'm restricted, so I can't
say anything. You can't give me shit. Yeah, sorry about that. And then just our shareholder base. I mean, a lot of retail, as you might expect. And I think, frankly, in an industry like ours, you can expect to see more strategic investment with us as we move forward with our plans. All right, a couple of other parallel initiatives. So I did mention that cobalt was the start. It's not the stop. The nickel piece is going to be very interesting for us. When you look at a battery of tomorrow, the 811 NCM cathode, if that means anything to you, 80-90% of the cathode is going to be nickel, with cobalt being 10% or less in terms of content. And so that, if you can imagine the size of the cobalt plant we're building and what we're going to need by way of a nickel plant, it's a pretty significant capex. And so we've been doing some studies. Government of Ontario and Canada joined with us, and we've also partnered, at least on a study basis, with Glencore and Talon Metals to try to conceptualize what a North American nickel sulfate plant might look like. Vale is doing the same in Quebec. We're doing that in Ontario. And what you really want to do in this industry is you want to try to bring everything together. So if you can do your refining of each of the commodities in one park and have your precursor, the next step of battery making right next door to you, you achieve some important synergies where we can keep our cobalt, for instance, in solution, and you pipe it over into the precursor plant. The alternative is you crystallize it, you send it to them, they then got to put it in solution. So there's some CapEx and OpEx savings by creating these integrated parks. You see it in China, you see it a little bit in Europe. We're striving for that in Ontario. And then the province of Quebec, they're trying to do the same. They've got POSCO with GM, BASF, Vale, and we've been invited to look at building a cobalt plant as well. So again, just better efficiencies, better competitiveness as you build out your plant. So we've got a nickel study going on in Ontario, and then we've got a cobalt study, pre-feasibility study that we're launching in the province of Quebec as part of our growth initiatives over the coming years. I think the most exciting thing, if you're going to start following us, and I hope you do, is going to be the recycling. Over the next 30 days, you're going to start to see news of black mass materials, so shredded battery material arriving at our site, going through our lab, going through the leach process, and then we'll share what we can in terms of our recoveries and our success at extracting the cobalt and the lithium and so forth. Interesting story, fact too, on lithium, if you follow that price curve, when we started down the journey of battery recycling, we wanted to see how much, could we get 95, 97% of cobalt and nickel out of a battery? As we sit here today, the lithium content alone, if you do that right, is worth as much as the cobalt and the nickel combined. So you really do got to target all five, because at any point in time, your economics are going to be driven by obviously the prevailing commodity prices of the day. And then lastly, I guess the big initiative out in Idaho, we've got a new target. I think, do we have a picture here? Maybe I'll come back to Ruby in a second and what we're doing in Idaho. Black mass, we don't share a lot. I mean, it's a leach, and change your pH levels. You're dropping off products as you go, but just to give you a sense of what we're doing, and I appreciate for anyone who's a metallurgist, you will not appreciate anything on this slide, but we do have a flow sheet. We're just fairly guarded with what it is, because it is an emerging industry, and while we all follow the same basic steps, there are some differences from plant to plant that we think could be material in terms of the recoveries that you receive. All right, Bécancour, I did talk about Quebec already, so I won't spend too much time on this, but you can see where this is. This is a brownfields industrial park midway between Montreal and Quebec City. It's got a deep water port. You're across the river from Trois-Rivières, and there's significant investment already announced, $400 million worth. And moreover, if I contrast it, we started our refinery in Ontario. We had joint federal provincial contributions of $10 million. If we want to do the same thing here, I estimate we could probably get $100 million of government contributions based on the formulas today. So we've come a long way. Canada's competing really effectively and fighting hard for what we call the midstream, the chemical steps in the supply chain, having lost a number of cell plants and assembly plants to the U.S. Why? Because these are not easy to permit a mine in the U.S., and this is not dissimilar, right? You've got water issues, you've got effluent, you've got tailings, and Canada is just a natural destination. It gets regulated under a mining act, and many of us in the room know how to do that. So we're going to see more of these parks, Quebec and Ontario being at the forefront right now. Idaho, I mean, I love this area. Beautiful country, wonderful people, and it's really hard to find primary cobalt deposits anywhere in the world, right? The DRC is north of 70% of cobalt production, and if you want to narrow that down and look at cobalt that's going into batteries, it goes up from there. So cobalt really is dominated by extraction in the DRC and processing in China. So our initial solution, we're going to solve the China piece, but if you want to start addressing the DRC piece on this continent, it really is the Idaho belt, and I would say the Idaho Geological Survey and the USGS would agree with that statement. History of production at Blackbird, some decades ago. You've got Sherwood to the north, and you've got Electra to the south. Iron Creek is where we sit, and you can get a sense of the resource now. We think we can double it. It's time and money. We got to drill. We got a good sense of where the mineralization is going, but we've been putting a lot of our money into our asset in Ontario. I think you'll see this grow with partnerships, downstream partners that want to see Idaho developed as a domestic source. So the most exciting thing we've seen in Idaho this year is that purple structure to the right of Iron Creek. So Iron Creek is the red resource table you saw on the previous slide, and 1.5 kilometers away looks like an offset extension, a best guess. Surface expressions, we've known about them for a couple of years, 2 or 3 years. We did some samples, similar mineralized texture, similar setting, geologic setting, but we needed to drill it, and we did it this year. Just 3 quick test holes, and what was most exciting for me is not the intercepts and the grades are actually pretty high grades, and we were pleased with that. But the most exciting thing for me was just the geological model that we used to target these holes predicted 2 intercepts in each of the 3 holes, and all 6 intersects hit exactly where the model predicted. And just by way of comfort in terms of follow-up, it really does tell you the area that we need to drill. And if you look at it, at least as represented here in this cartoon, it has the potential to be of equal size to Iron Creek. So excited. It's going to take a little time. Iron Creek's sitting on patented land. Ruby is in Forest Service property, so we'll have to sequence them accordingly. And then lastly, I just want to talk about ESG here really quickly. I touched upon it, but if you're in a zero emission industry, you really got to worry about your own emissions and your own carbon footprint. It's governance, of course, as well, and social, and we're close to our Indigenous communities. We've got benefit agreement in place and a few more coming. No demonstrated impacts in the environment, which obviously the community appreciates. And because we're sourcing our cobalt from the DRC, there's a whole sustainability upstream portion that you've got to address as well. And our VP Sustainability is in the Congo as we speak, visiting the Glencore mines to get comfortable that they are adequately certified and won't impact or taint our own supply chain. First sustainability report coming out in December, so we'll have a lot more to discuss on that. Our footprint, and this is the big thing that everybody does care about. our footprint being 50% lower than our Chinese competitors. I mean, that does matter when you're producing downstream your own sustainability report that shows your carbon footprint, scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. We get counted in that. So they are leaning on the supply chain, and it does help market our own product. All right, I'm out of time. I think I've talked about all of that. Favorable market, near-term milestones, recycling, the big one, and then cash flow starting in the spring as we hit production. So maybe I will pause it there.